Hey folks, this is Kalani. There have been some massive changes to patch 9.1 this week. We're going to be able to trade our mythic plus keystones in for a different one. The shards of domination have been changed yet again, but this time we also have a preview of the special set bonuses that we'll get to play with. Trading soul ash to your alts is going to be much easier, and there are even some changes to the weekly Great Vault loot options. There's a lot to talk about, so let's jump right in. Let's kick things off with the class changes as per usual. This week we have some big changes coming through for the monks, but it's only one spec, I'm afraid. For the Mistweaver monks, Tiger Palm damage has been increased by 10%, Blackout Kick damage has been increased by 10%, Rising Sun Kick damage has been increased by 10%, and then Spinning Crane Kick damage has been increased by 20%. Is it me, or does it look like the dev team really wants to bring back Fist Weaving Monk with these changes? Even if it's not straight up healing boosts, dealing a bit more damage might make Fist Weavers more viable, especially when you consider that Holy Paladin damage was just nerfed quite considerably. That's not all though. Enveloping Mist mana cost has been reduced down to 5.6% base mana from 6%. Revival rank 2 is now learned at level 56, and it causes Revival to also proc Gust of Winds on each target healed, so your Mastery will also proc on Revival targets, giving you a massive boost to the healing potential of your main raid cooldown, as if Revival didn't instantly heal for enough already. But then to compensate for this change, I guess, Revival healing was reduced by 10%. Hopefully that still ends up being a nice buff to the spell though. I haven't seen many Mistweavers in my travels recently. I know our main Mistweaver actually quit raiding, while our other monks just swapped classes because they didn't enjoy Mistweaver, so I hope to see some more monks in patch 9.1 with some of these changes in place, and you never know, we might see a lot more monk changes in the coming weeks. Moving on, the big nerf that we knew was coming to Anti-Magic Zone appeared on the PTR this week. Anti-Magic Zone's cooldown was increased to 3 minutes, up from 2 minutes, and it will now fade when it absorbs a certain amount of damage. So not only did they increase the cooldown to prevent you from using it too often, but they also put a cap onto the overall damage that AMZ can absorb. That could make this a significantly less powerful cooldown overall, but it could also make it an unreliable cooldown. If the absorb cap is reached too quickly, your raid could be left defenseless during a massive raid damage spike, which turns AMZ into more of a group-wide absorb spell rather than a group-wide damage reduction spell. Either way, Death Knights will find themselves with a much weaker raid-wide cooldown going into patch 9.1. And then to round out this week's changes, Affliction Warlocks have been taken down a notch once again. The brand new 9.1 conduit, Withering Bolt, which increases the damage of your filler spell for each active damage over time effect, has been slashed in half once more. So now we're down to 10% increased damage for Shadow Bolt and just 5% increased damage for Drained Soul per dot effect from this conduit. I guess the dev team really don't want Affliction Warlocks to go into this patch at the top of the DPS meters after all. There was also a small change for the Destro locks. The Shadowburn talent's damage was increased by 23%, and it now refreshes a charge if the target dies within 5 seconds. I'll be honest, I kind of forgot this talent existed, and I doubt this will be enough to bring it back into the minds of most Destruction Warlocks. That could heavily depend on the raid encounters though. If there are lots of ads that die kinda quickly, it could maybe end up being worth it. We'll just have to wait and see. But would you look at that, Balanced Druids actually managed to stay out of the patch notes for a week. There may be hope for some other classes getting some attention after all. Then we also have an update to the Shards of Domination system with more info on how they're going to work, how to actually get the shards, how we can upgrade them to better versions, and we even have a sneak preview of the set bonuses that you can work towards. First things first, where do we get these shards from? According to a recent blue post, the shards themselves can be found from defeating Sanctum of Domination raid bosses. If you look at the dungeon journal and look at the boss loot right now, shards of domination are nowhere to be seen. So we're still not sure if this is a random drop, if specific bosses dropped specific shards, or how it's really going to work. There are 10 bosses in the raid and 9 shards of domination to choose from, so it could be 1 shard from each boss excluding the last boss. That's just a guess though. We'll have to wait until the boss loot tables are updated or until the source is data mined, but we do know for sure that the shards will come from the raid bosses. That's only one part of the puzzle here though, because each shard of domination can also be upgraded. We have a bit more info about this, thankfully. In the new Courtier zone, you can visit Bonesmith Heamer to view all of the available upgrades for each of the 9 shards of domination. Right now, each upgrade only seems to improve the same basic effect numerically. I know in previous iterations of the shard system, the upgrades added special new effects onto the shard, but that doesn't seem to be the case anymore. So each upgrade just improves what a shard already does. To fuel these upgrades for your shards, you'll need to collect a new currency. Yes, one more currency for you to keep track of in 9.1. This time we'll be collecting Stygian Embers. This currency also comes from bosses in the new 9.1 raid, so as long as you're progressing through the raid and killing more bosses, you should be earning Stygian Embers. I imagine the higher difficulties of the raid will probably drop more Stygian Embers, and this will probably be a weekly lockout per boss type of deal. The shard upgrades start off relatively cheap at only 5 embers, but they get progressively more expensive, with the very last upgrade costing you 50 embers. Remember that we will have up to 5 shards to upgrade as well, so that's going to take a very long time depending on how many Stygian embers we can collect per week. And then before we move on, let's check out the Shard of Domination set bonuses that were data mined this week. Remember, to trigger a set bonus, you need to equip 3 blood shards, 3 frost shards, or 3 unholy shards, so this shouldn't be too hard overall. For the Blood 3 set bonus, damaging an enemy establishes a Blood Link. Blood Link pulses every 3 seconds, dealing shadow damage and healing you for 100% of damage dealt. If your Blood Link would overheal you, it instead heals a nearby ally, and there's a limit of 1 Blood Link. This could be really cool, and it's a full package when you look at it. You have a damage component, a self-healing component, and then if you're full health, it's also a group heal. This could be a great choice for any role, which really frees you up for picking a blood shard no matter what class or spec you play. For the Frost 3 set bonus, each time you deal a critical strike, the Winds of Winter accumulate 6% of that effect, up to a cap per critical strike. Every 20 seconds, the winds unleash, dealing frost damage equal to the total accumulation and surrounding you in winds for 20 seconds, absorbing 100% of the damage dealt by the winds. So you store up damage from crits, and then it's unleashed every 20 seconds as extra damage, but also an absorb shield. This is going to be great for anyone that stacks crit or passively crits a lot due to how their spec works, like Fire Mage. A damage absorb shield could end up being very powerful for certain DPS specs, but I guess we'll have to wait and see. For the Unholy 3 set bonus, your spells and abilities have a chance to drain a soul fragment from your target, granting you 10 primary stat for 30 seconds and stacking up to 15 times. When you reach 15 stacks, unleash Chaos Bane, dealing shadow damage split between nearby enemies and granting you 300 primary stat for 15 seconds. So it's basically Shadowmourne, right? But that's not a bad thing. This could end up being an incredibly powerful effect for the vast majority of DPS classes, or really anyone who scales well with their primary stat. The only caveat here is the potential melee range requirement for the Chaos Bane damage, which could force a lot of ranged players to start hugging bosses, which usually doesn't end too well. These set bonuses are also only active in the Maw zone, the Courtier zone, in Torghast, and then in the new Sanctum of Domination raid. The passive effects are active everywhere in game, just in case you missed that important piece of information in a previous week's video. I'm actually really excited to get my hands on these shards. Seeing as we have at least some control over which shards we work towards first and upgrade first, we will also be able to specifically target one of these set bonuses. I think this system is going to add a bit more fun into raid gearing in general, which is always welcome in my opinion. Now there is one other major change in this latest PTR build relating to the new Shards of Domination. I know we've talked about this briefly in a previous video, but the only gear that you can socket these shards into is special raid gear that comes with Domination sockets. In previous PTR builds, these sockets were spread out amongst various different pieces of gear, with some items having up to 3 sockets. From the same blue post as earlier, we know the plan is for players to be able to socket up to 5 shards. 5 is going to be our maximum here, so these old pieces of gear gave us a lot of flexibility for how to achieve that 5 shard cap. That's no longer going to be the case. Right now on the PTR there are 5 gear slots that have 1 domination socket each. Which gear slot has a socket seems to depend on your armor type. For example, for cloth wearers, their sockets can be found on chest, head, shoulders, braces and belts. For the leather wearers, they're on chest, head, shoulders, hands and boots. For mail, it's chest, head, shoulders, belt and boots. And then for plate, it's currently chest, head, shoulders, braces and hands. With only one socket available on each piece of gear right now, that means you have to use the raid gear in each of these slots to achieve your 5 shard cap. That might have a few unintended knock-on effects. The main problem this might cause is a conflict with your legendary gear. If the slot in which you currently use a legendary item is now being tied down by the Shard of Domination system, you might have to remake your legendary or give up 1 Shard of Domination in patch 9.1. For legendaries which have a different available slot that does not have a domination socket in 9.1, that's a fairly easy swap. Just recreate your legendary for the other gear slot and continue on your way. But what about the legendaries that only have options that overlap with the Shard of Domination system? That gets a bit more complicated. You would then literally have to choose between using that legendary effect or using an extra Shard of Domination. This could cause the best in slot legendary tier list to shift dramatically dependent on how powerful these shards end up being, so it's going to be yet another system or factor to take into consideration when simming your character, which is going to be a tad frustrating. This system now also potentially devalues Mythic Plus gear and PvP gear because Domination sockets cannot be found on any gear outside of the 9.1 Sanctum of Domination raid gear, so your best in slot list may end up being full of raid gear in Season 2. Again, it's going to depend on how powerful these shards end up being. Remember that this is all PTR information right now, so anything and everything could change by the time this goes live, but it never hurts to be prepared. Am I saying that you should completely remake all of your legendary items to avoid overlaps and conflicts with the current gear slot options for domination sockets? Absolutely not, but what I do suggest is you save up enough soul ash to make a quick swap to a different legendary slot, or maybe even a completely different legendary, just in case the Shard of Domination system ends up turning the legendary tier list on its head. That's what I would do, just so you go into patch 9.1 as prepared as possible. I'll be sure to update you on this system as we see more changes on the PTR. This next update is going to be amazing for all you Mythic Plus Dungeoneers out there. If you don't have a Mythic Plus Keystone, either because you didn't run a Keystone last week or you haven't run one in a while, you can now pop by the Great Vault to find Tassoop. This NPC will now give you a Keystone if you don't have one already, which means you won't have to run another dungeon just to get a key. The only requirements for getting a key from this NPC is to not have a key already, and you must have completed at least one Shadowlands dungeon on Mythic Plus difficulty. So at this point, that's probably everyone, right? That's not all though. Apparently when you finish a Mythic Plus Keystone dungeon, you will now be given the opportunity to swap your Keystone for a different one. The main point here is to change the dungeon that your Keystone is for, so if you have a key for Sanguine Depths, and you absolutely just cannot stand the Sanguine Depths dungeon, you can talk to this chap who will appear at the end of a run and swap your Keystone for something else. There do appear to be a few restrictions on this swap though. The NPC will only appear at the end of a Mythic Plus dungeon run, and only when the dungeon was completed within time. So if you didn't manage to time your current key, this NPC will not appear. Your Keystone also has to be at the same level or lower than the run you just completed for it to be eligible for a trade. A higher Keystone cannot be traded, and the Keystone that was used to start the dungeon that was just completed cannot be traded either. The blue post also mentions this trade as being a one-time thing, which could just mean you can only trade once per dungeon you run, or you may be limited to trading your Keystone once per week. I would imagine a once per dungeon trade to be more likely. It means if you don't like the Keystone that you just traded for, you can run another dungeon for another attempt to trade it into a dungeon you actually want to run. That makes the most sense to me anyway. These two changes increase the flexibility of the Mythic Plus Keystone system, and you'll have a few options of how to acquire a Keystone, but also to change which Keystones you have access to. Patch 9.1 and Season 2 are going to be a very exciting time for Mythic Plus dungeons. And then another amazing change in this most recent PTR build is for the Soul Ash alt trading item, Packaged Soul Ash. Previously, the only place you could buy this item was on floor 5 of a Torghast run from the broker vendor, and you could only buy one of them per run, for some weird reason. That was crazily stupid, in my opinion. Thankfully, the dev team seems to agree, because you can now purchase Packaged Soul Ash from a vendor in the new Korthia zone. All you have to do is unlock the zone, pop on over to the vendor, vendor and buy as much soul ash as you want to send over. Of course, you still lose some of your soul ash when you buy the packaged soul ash. They now cost 300 soul ash and your alt will receive 250 when they open it, so you lose 50 soul ash for every 300 you spend, which is actually quite a lot. That's fully 1/6 of your total soul ash cost that is lost. But at least we won't have to run Torghast for each packaged soul ash item anymore. There was also an interesting update on the PTR this week for the Great Vault, though it might not be what you expect. We won't see any changes for the requirements to earn items from the weekly vault just yet, but when you don't have any items on offer that you want to pick from, you will have a new option besides just the Stygia backup reward. Now when you choose an alternative reward, you will get 3 attendance token of merit. You can use these merits to trade for other currencies from the nearby NPC vendor Kotul. Right now you can trade 1 merit for 250 soul ash, 500 Stygia or 175 anima. So we have 2 additional currencies we can pick from here, but because you get 3 merits and you only need to spend 1 at a time, you can also pick and choose what you want to spend them on. Maybe 2 soul ash and 1 Stygia, or maybe just all 3 anima this week. It's completely up to you. This is also a fantastic setup for introducing other currencies into this list later on down the line. You wouldn't have to change the weekly vault backup reward, you just have to add a new currency onto this vendor's list and have it cost a merit. With so many different new currencies to collect in patch 9.1, from Soul Cinders, Stygian Embers, Catalogued Research and plenty of others, I wouldn't be surprised if some of those currencies made it into this vendor's lists of goods sometime later in patch 9.1 or maybe in a future patch of the Shadowlands. It's a fully expandable system and it offers more flexibility when you get unlucky in your vault. This is a fantastic change all around if you ask me. And then before we wrap up this week's video, we have another change to file under things we never asked for, but the dev team keeps throwing our way to make a system that nobody likes sort of a tiny bit better, maybe. This time we're talking about conduit energy. In patch 9.1, whenever you earn a renown, you will now also get 1 charge of conduit energy replenished in your soulbind window. So that means you get 1 conduit energy every 24 hours, 1 conduit energy whenever you learn a new conduit, and then 1 conduit energy whenever you earn a renown. The 10 conduit energy cap has not been changed right now on the PTR, so you are still limited by that, but it looks like filling up your conduit energy is going to happen way more often in patch 9.1, assuming you're spending more than 1 per day anyway. Personally, I think removing conduit energy as a whole would be much easier, much faster, it wouldn't consume any further development time or resources, for example by adding in more sources of conduit energy, and it would only have a positive effect on gameplay. But that's just my thoughts on the system. I guess getting extra conduit energy whenever you earn renown is better than nothing at all, but it still doesn't change much in the long run if you ask me. But that's all of the PTR news this week, and that's it for this video. What do you think of the Shard of Domination set bonuses from what we've seen so far? Would you like to see the shards become more powerful, or do you think they should only provide a small bonus? How do you feel about 5 gear slots potentially being locked down by this new system? Leave all your thoughts in the comment section below. A big thank you to all of our supporters over on Patreon and to everyone who has subscribed on Twitch. You can see their names floating by on screen. If you want to see more videos like this, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss another video. Thanks for watching folks, good luck and have fun, and as always I will see you next time.